Yes.
And I just also
Well, let me know what we talk about. Okay, whatever. I can do another month.
Good morning. We're going to get the meeting underway. We know that there are people watching us from home and we don't want them lingering too long in cyberspace. I'm Sarah Drogan. I'm Vice President of the Stonebridge Book Club. Robin Pavia called me this morning. She's ill. She couldn't make it. So I'm Robin this morning. And I want to offer each of you a warm welcome to the 2021-2022 season. Welcome. I thought I would start by introducing the board members that are here today. Again, I'm Vice President. Secretary Stephanie Tomolovich. Did she just stand up? Yeah. Kathy Tyberski, I think most of you know, she's still out front counting money. Communications, Carol Henry. And there are 3 charities that we support. And we have here today Aline Leiden, who is our point person for the life literacy of volunteers for county. Thank you. And we also support Naples Park Elementary and Grace Place. I want to let you know that next month, Betsy Gallo will be our presenter. She will be presenting Hamnet, which was one of the New York Times book review top 5 novels of 2020. That's going to be on November 12th. We need help with the sign-in committee. Cecilia Price was out there today along with Kathy. If any of you could volunteer to help us out in the future, that would be wonderful. Could you please let Kathy know? As far as the luncheon today, Oh, great. Thank you. Good. As far as luncheon today, as I understand it, there is no formal luncheon as we have where you check off what you want, but you are of course invited to go to the bistro and enjoy lunch afterwards. The secretary's report, Stephanie posted it on the door, and we would like to have it approved. Could I have a motion to approve? Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you. And can we approve it? All in favor? Thank you. They're approved, Stephanie. Treasurer's report? Is Kathy? Oh, she's still out there. Okay. We'll come back to her. So Aline received a wonderful thank you note, and we thought that she would read it to you today from the literacy volunteers of Collier County.
So LVCC is Literacy Volunteers of Collier County. We have supported them for many years, and their primary objective is to teach English as the second language. So the thank you letter says, we appreciate your club's charitable gifts. Last year's gift of $2,850 facilitated the distribution of 368 books to 48 families across 18 Collier County public schools in their pre-kindergarten sites. Pretty good. Their executive board at LVCC would like the honor of recording some of you as you read aloud from a favorite children's book. So you see, they're building a digital video library modeling good reading. And their goal is to have 50 recordings, audio and video, for families to watch and emulate to help build their confidence in reading together in English with their little ones. So, grandmas, great aunts, unite and let's read to the little ones. LVCC will come to us and record here if you wish, or we could go down to their place, which is on 41 South, or East or West. Way out of here. But I checked with Mary, and we could do it here on Mondays or Tuesdays in the Live Oak room. That would have to be after November 4th. We should be pretty busy in that room right now. So I have a sign-up sheet, and I'll be out here in the front desk. Yes. You may choose the book. Yeah, wouldn't it be fun, wouldn't it? What are your favorite little books? And it's so easy to do. Read a book. Could be fun, yes. Preschool? I would think. Yes.
I've done that for other organizations, and I would read the book and then donate the book.
How sweet. Okay. Thank you. Remember LVCC.
Kathy, I see you've come in. Would you like to give us the treasurer's report, please?
I don't have all the details with me, but we had a good year last year, even though we couldn't meet or close together. We did donate a lot of money to 3 different charities, and we kept $260 in our bank account. Today we have 33 people here, and 30 people have joined today.
We gave each charity that same amount.
Yeah, I forget how much it was.
2,800.
800.
What did I say? 50?
28.
We did very well. Great charity.
Thank you.
Okay. So like to ask each of you to make sure your phones are turned off. Going to move into the presentation part of our meeting now. I want to thank Geri McCarthy. She is our presenter today. She's a very dear friend, and as she will attest, I was unrelenting in my pursuit of her last spring. I finally wore her down and she acquiesced, and I know we will all be very impressed by her presentation. So a little bit about Geri. Geri's been a resident of Stonebridge for the last 9 years. She began in Braeburn and recently moved to Hawthorne Estates. She was born in Ireland, and when she was 10 years old, moved to Queens, New York. She grew up in the largely Irish immigrant community of Woodside, and like the large Irish diaspora in Woodside, was taught by nuns from K through 12. She graduated from Long Island University in 1971 and proceeded to join her husband, Jack, in numerous Air Force assignments across the country. Along the way, she taught in Texas and Arizona. Geri spent the last 20 years of her teaching career in Barrington, Rhode Island. She taught advanced placement world history and economics and was the head of the social studies department prior to her retirement. Geri won the Millikan Award, a national award for excellence in teaching during the 1999-2000 school year. Over the years, Geri has served on many civic, educational, and community boards. She was a teacher representative to the Barrington Education Foundation and a 6-year member and secretary of the Blythewell Museum and Arboretum Board in Bristol, Rhode Island. Subsequent to her move to Naples, Geri joined the Lead Club and has served on its Community Involvement Committee, providing grants to nonprofits in the greater Naples area. She's also a graduate of Class 23 of Greater Naples Leadership and presently serves on one of its committees. So, Geri.
Thanks, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Let's start by looking at the cover of the book. The cover that you are looking at right now is the US cover, and it shows the two main characters in the novel, Shuggie and his mother, Agnes. As we will see later on, the representation on this cover, while seemingly a serene scene of domestic and parental nurturing, becomes very problematic and disturbing. This is the UK version of Shuggie Bain. It also has some of its own powerful symbolism. Shuggie is represented on a cross. As you read the book, you will see that this is a story of suffering, but also a story of redemption. One reviewer likened Douglas Stewart's powers of description in his debut novel about Glasgow to James Joyce's treatment of Dublin. However, Stewart's portrayal of Glasgow is much grittier than Joyce's descriptions of Dublin. If you read Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt, you might find some similarities with the Douglas Stewart book. I will tell a little bit about the author at the end for a reason. Shuggie Bain's life and story is also the story of Glasgow, to some extent. Hugh, his nickname was Shuggie. Hugh Shuggie Bain is a sweet, lonely boy who spends his 1980s childhood in rundown schemes in some of the roughest public housing in Glasgow. These schemes play a significant role in Stewart's book, which, by the way, won the 2020 Booker Prize, beating out well-known authors such as Colin McCann,
Hilary Mantel, and Ann Tyler. 4 different housing schemes are the book's only table of contents. So, a little history of Glasgow. The city of Glasgow was one of Britain's powerhouse cities during the Industrial Revolution. In order to feed the local demand for labor, Glasgow City Councils built what were then known as tenement housing, actually decent housing, multi-room apartments with high-ceilinged roofs. However, as Glasgow became an even bigger industrialized city in the late 19th and 20th centuries, demand outstripped supply, and many of these originally fine tenements often became overcrowded with multiple families. The tenements soon deteriorated into slums where disease spread. In the 1960s, Glasgow City Council decided to get rid of the tenements and build massive social housing schemes. For some people, these schemes, or high-rise flats, as they were called, were the first time they had indoor toilets. Interestingly enough, the social architects of the time, a la the French modernist architect like Corbusier, called them gardens in the sky, because many had concrete balconies. However, people could not walk out onto the balconies for fear of being blown away. As some of you might know, Glasgow has some of the worst weather in the UK. According to a passage in the book, quote, "Rain was the natural state of Glasgow. It kept the grass green and the people pale and bronchial," end quote. In the beginning, these 20-story towers were considered architectural wonders and the answer to Glasgow's social housing problems. In New York, where I grew up, we called them the projects. The 20-story towers in these schemes were a cultural shock for the new tenants, with thousands of people crammed into small apartments. Now, here are some of these pictures. Sighthill scheme had over 7,500 residents. The hallways and corridors were narrow, and the elevators often seeped of urine. Gradually, drug gangs took over the towers and sold drugs in plain sight. Quote, "It became intolerable," one resident said. "We had people shooting up everywhere in the flats, in the lifts. No one was working, and a lot of people were getting wasted." There used to be a morning rush hour in the flats, a rush to get to the lifts, to get to the car park, and then to get to work. But that all stopped when no one had jobs. This was also the time when Margaret Thatcher's Conservative government was tearing apart the city's old industries, leaving thousands of people without jobs and hope. More about this later. Heroin was seen as a cheap and easy escape. Now, I have to say, you might have to put on your listening ears to hear this video. Some of you who have been watching Outlander will probably catch on more quickly than others. But the woman that you are going to hear, Deborah, was a resident of Sighthill. And so this is a short 3-minute video of her experience in Sighthill. I'm only choosing one little portion of the video with this young woman, Deborah, who describes her experience there.
Because after the last memories when obviously home, be quite out up, to be honest with you.
See, this part I didn't put in it because I couldn't even understand it. Really? Okay. I would just turn it off then. Okay. All right. So basically what Deborah says in this is that she lived there because she had to. She was a young woman and this was the only place that she could live and could afford. But when she had a child, it all turned around. When that child had to go to school, she realized that this was no place to bring up a child. Although many children, including, by the way, Douglas Stewart, was actually brought up in these schemes. But what she talked about, again, was some of the things that I have said about the drug use, the elevators, the lifts, as they call them, reeking of urine. So that basically is it. But it was nice to hear her talk about it. So on to the novel. I thought the best way to tell you a little bit about the novel is to introduce you to its main characters. Shuggie Bain. Shuggie lived on the 16th floor in one of those 20-story towers you just saw. The flat belonged to his grandparents, Lizzie and Willie. However, Shuggie lived there with his mother, Agnes, his father, Hugh, Big Shug, his 15-year-old brother, Alexander, called Leek, and his 16-year-old sister, Catherine. The flat was suffocatingly small for the large amount of people crammed into it. The only person that seemed to work was Big Shug, and it was questionable how much actual work he did as he drove his taxi around Glasgow at night. Shuggie is the novel's protagonist, though much of the plot follows his mother, Agnes. 8-year-old Shuggie has Agnes's thick hair, beautiful and black. She has taught him to be prim and proper and to speak proper English. This, of course, puts him at odds with much of the residents in the schemes who used the lower-class Glaswegian dialect and slang. From a young age, it is evident that Shuggie is not like other boys. No matter how much he tries, he is no good at football or other sports of boys his age. One of Agnes's friends tells her, "Ye should focus yourself on that wee puffy boy of yours." Shuggie's childhood is marked by anxiety and worry for his mother, and he has little time to figure out his own identity. With an absent father and 2 older siblings who find their own methods of getting away from the home, Shuggie starts to take care of his mom at an age when he should only be playing. He helps her undress and makes her tea in the mornings to help with her hangovers. One reviewer summed up Shuggie as, quote, "wise beyond his years and forgiving beyond compare." His unwavering love for his damaged mother is the glue that keeps this engrossing story together. Despite everything, Shuggie fiercely loves and protects his mother, and that is what makes the novel even more heartbreaking. Agnes loved him back, but her affection is not enough to make her quit the drink. Shuggie often asks her, "Why am I not enough to make you stop the drink?" Shuggie eventually develops from a shy, fearful victim to a stronger character by the end of the novel. We see his development in the way he reacts to abuse. At first, accepting it passively, and later fighting back. And in the final moments of his mother's life, when he decides for once to let his mother face the fatal consequences of her own self-destructive actions. We see that he does not regret his choice. Agnes Bain. I often wondered while I was reading this book why it was not called Agnes Bain instead of Shuggie Bain. Because Agnes, Shuggie's as beautiful as Elizabeth Taylor, he always referred to her, alcoholic mother, is a reckoning force in the novel. Ambitious, glamorous, calamitous Agnes is a victim of unrealistic expectations and alcohol. But she is the center of Shuggie's world, although a world that is heartbreakingly lonely, sad, and abusive. She is Shuggie's guiding light, but also a burden for him and his siblings. Agnes was married once before to a fellow Catholic, Brendan McGowan, but left him to marry Big Shug. Her two oldest children, Catherine and Leek, by her first marriage, are considerably older than Shuggie. Agnes does not want to stay in the flat with the neighborhood women and play bingo on a Friday night. She wants to dress up and go dancing. She has expectations. She dreams of a house with its own front door, while she flicks through the pages of the Freeman's catalog, perhaps like the old Sears and Roebuck catalog or Montgomery Ward catalog of years ago. Quote, ordering a little happiness on tick, credit, anything to brighten up her gray life. Extra strong lager and bottles of vodka seem to be her only choice and her only sauce. In a particularly poignant passage, Stewart writes, quote, some days you could starve rather than get a hot meal. But Shuggie looked at her now and understood this was where she excelled. Every day, with the makeup on and her hair done, she climbed out of her grave and held her head high. When she had disgraced herself with the drink, she got up the next day, put on her best coat, and faced the world. When her belly was empty and her weans were hungry, she did her hair and let the world think otherwise. Children of alcoholics can sympathize with these sentiments. Big Shug's many infidelities, coupled with a deep dissatisfaction with her own life, drove Agnes's self-destructive behavior. As when she tried to kill herself and 8-year-old Shuggie by setting her room on fire and later on attempting suicide. When I look at the picture on the front of the book, I am always astounded by the loving look of Shuggie as he snuggles up to Agnes right before she sets him and the roof on fire. Big Shug. Agnes abandons her first husband because of all the possibilities she saw in tall, dark, handsome Shug Bain. It was not long before the reality of her new life sunk in. Shug is emotionally, physically, and sexually abusive. He is a hackney driver who spends a good part of the night drinking and philandering with customers and his regulars. Lizzie, Agnes's mother, often glowers at Agnes as Shug fails to return from his night shift. Everyone knows about Shug's infidelities. There are no secrets in the Sighthill scheme. The abuse that Agnes suffers from Shug is one of the more horrifying parts of the novel. There is one particularly jarring scene when Agnes and Shug go on a short holiday to the seaside at Blackpool. Agnes is thrilled to be out of Sighthill, the beach. But an evening out ends up with Shug dragging a very drunk Agnes up the stairs of their rental B&B by her hair. Her screams are heard by the other B&B residents. When Agnes asks later, "Why did you do that?" Big Shug says, "You are making a show of me." His behavior is nothing short of thuggish. Nevertheless, Agnes stays with Shug and now dreams of getting out of Sight Hill and having a place of her own with a front door and a garden. Despite the overwhelming challenges his cheating and her alcoholism present, she is optimistic and thinks that a fresh start with Shug is all that is needed to set her world aright. When Shug finally moves them, instead of it being a new beginning for them, he unexpectedly dumps the family in a rundown council house where tough, down-on-their-luck women run the community. Shug grabs his brand new red suitcase and moves in with a woman who works as a dispatcher in the taxi company. His son, Shuggie, is an afterthought in his life. He constantly makes fun of Shuggie's lack of manliness. Catherine and Leek are Agnes's older children from her first marriage to Brendan McGowan. Catherine is the oldest and is forced to leave school at 16 to help out the family. She may be the only one in the novel that can truly see the writing on the wall. She realizes that Agnes is beyond help and that she needs to just save herself. She marries a distant relative and moves to South Africa, never to be heard from again. She also leaves Shuggie and Leek to deal with their alcoholic mother. Out from one horrific scene in chapter 5, where she is accosted and hunted down by a gang of prepubescent boys, she's the least developed character of the book. Leek tries to physically escape the trauma of the Bain household. He routinely holds up in a pallet fort away from the scheme or retreats to his bed under the covers. He is a gifted artist who will never have the opportunity to pursue his talent. He spends as much time as he can sketching the weekends away in his makeshift home inside his pallet fort. He is kind to Shuggie and tries to provide him with some kind of male role model. However, Agnes's drunken benders are beyond his capacity to deal with. He eventually moves out, leaving Shuggie to deal with Agnes and her broken life. Lizzie and Willie are Agnes's parents. Their small apartment on the 16th floor of Sight Hill scheme is bursting at the seams when all the Bains live there. Like many in Sight Hill, multiple families crowd these small apartments to survive the Thatcherite social and economic agendas. Both Lizzie and Willie harbor secrets that they try to keep from the family. Lizzie disapproves of Agnes's drinking, but hides her own beer cans, and she and Willie often disappear to their room to down a pint of whiskey. Although Willie seems at first to be the stabilizing force in their dysfunctional house, he has done something abhorrent after returning from the war, when he discovers that Lizzie has had a child by one of the men she bedded so that the family could get money to eat. The secret only comes out on Willie's deathbed. The concept of getting rid of a 6-month-old baby does not seem to make any difference in Lizzie and Willie's marriage. We are never really sure how Willie got rid of Lizzie's baby, and Lizzie doesn't have. So those are the main characters in the novel, but there are some really overriding themes that course through this book as well. Alcoholism, abuse, sexuality, and economic and societal collapse. Alcoholism. Agnes's alcoholism robbed Shuggie and Leek of their livelihoods. Instead of living like normal children, the two brothers live in a constant state of anxiety, never knowing what they're going to come home to. Although a very small boy, Shuggie spends most of his childhood avoiding school to take care of Agnes when she is on a drunken bender. He often misses school on Tuesdays so that he can pick up the Tuesday welfare book because Agnes is too drunk to get out of bed. Shuggie and Leek frequently go hungry because Agnes spends most of their money on alcohol. The constant state of anxiety and fear manifests itself in Shuggie as digestive issues. He is frequently on the verge of soiling himself. Catherine, of course, realizes the futility of life with Agnes and heads to South Africa with her new husband, while Leek cools on temporarily. However, the strain of being the quote man of the house, the one keeping things together for everyone's sake, becomes too much, and Leek leaves for good after an argument with Agnes about her drinking. Unfortunately, Leek was the sole source of income for the family, as Agnes routinely spent the Tuesday book money on alcohol. Agnes's realization that she had to change and finally commit to sobriety in AA was a blissful year-long interlude for Shuggie. They had food to eat. Agnes got a job at a gas station and met a gentleman who was not abusive to her. Eugene was her lifeline, until he took her to dinner and asked her to have a glass of wine with him. For Agnes, it was the beginning of the end. Her alcoholism became even more destructive than before. In 1989, Agnes and Shuggie moved into a flat, and hoping that this will help her kick her drinking habit. Shuggie hopes it will help him become more like a normal boy. Neither of their wishes come true. Agnes dies the day after her birthday, choking on her own vomit, passed out in her chair. Shuggie does not save her. He realizes that Leek was correct after all. He could not save her from herself. The second theme of the book is sexuality. More than anything, Shuggie wants to be normal. At times, his brother Leek gets exasperated with him and says, "Why can't you be normal once?" Shuggie responds, "I am normal." However, he is not like the other boys in the scheme. He has a fascination with My Little Pony figurines and likes to play fantasy games with them. He faces constant bullying from other children and is called a wee poof. In the beginning, Shuggie doesn't even know what that means. He is told that he needs to fix that, but he doesn't know what that is. He tries to memorize football scores from all the teams so he can carry on conversations with the boys, but he faces constant bullying from other children in the scheme and is eventually sexually abused by an older boy named Bonnie Johnny, and later by a taxi driver. Following Leek's departure from the flat, he is often alone. Because he has grown up in such turmoil and must always look out for his mother, Shuggie continues to struggle with who he is. Homophobia is the cultural norm in the schemes, but he is precocious and resilient. At the end of the novel, Shuggie meets Leanne, a young girl that is also dealing with an alcoholic mother. They develop a sweet friendship, but he comes to realize that he does not like girls that way and will never be normal in the way society wants him to be. The novel begins and ends with an orphaned 16-year-old Shuggie in a one-room bedsit. He is trying to continue at school as he works a full-time job at Kilfeather's grocery. He also becomes prey to a lecherous old man in the rooming house. The third theme is abuse. Working class life in Glasgow was treacherous. For those without a job and living on the dole, it was devastatingly sordid. Misogyny was another cultural norm in the schemes. Shugg's behavior to Agnes was just one example of the pervasive abuse that women especially were subject to. In chapter 5, the author paints a grim picture of a girl's life in Glasgow as Catherine tries to find her brother Leek, who has been hiding in a secret pellet fort away from the never-ending chaos in the flat. She is accosted by a gang of young boys who threaten to give her a Glasgow smile. In other words, a knife cut from both sides of her mouth to her ears, over something as seemingly petty as which team, the Catholic Celtics or the Protestant Rangers, she favors. Shockingly, these boys were younger than 15-year-old Catherine, but their thuggish behavior has been learned from their early years in the scheme. Stewart describes the scene this way. There are voices pitched, ready to break, the dangerous sound of little boys coming into the intoxicating power of manhood. Boys learned early about their power over women. The fourth theme in the novel is political. 1980s England was an economic and social disaster for the working class. When Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, she closed down many of the industries where people worked. When Agnes Bain finally convinced her husband that they need to get out of the Side Hill scheme, she's elated that Shug is moving the family to a council house, again public housing, but in Pithead. She thinks that life will be better in the mining town. After Shug leaves her standing on the front steps of her new life, she soon discovers that the mines had closed and everyone was out of work in Pithead. Pithead, by the way, is a generic name. Pit was the mine and the head was the swampy, squishy land over the mine. The physical description of Pithead very closely matches Cardamom, a town very close to where Side Hill and where the author lived. It's a mining town on the northeast side of Glasgow. Pithead was just a collection of miners' houses on the edge of town, run by a sometimes colorful, funny gang of housewives, but at times a brutal army of down-and-out mothers with little compassion for each other. Stewart describes what Agnes saw as those happening pulled up to her promised new life. Quote, the housing scheme spread out suddenly before them. Each house had exactly the same amount of patchy garden, and each garden was dissected by identical crisscrossing of whitewashing lines and gray poles. Mining towns were particularly hard hit. Many of these mining towns were pockmarked eyesores from the abandoned mines. And this is a picture of what they looked like, swampy ground above the mines looked like. Unemployment was 33% during Thatcher's administration. Inflation in the 1980s and Thatcher's plan to raise interest rates made it even more difficult for the working class. It is interesting to note that when Margaret Thatcher died, there were hundreds of parties in miners' villages all over Scotland. The other tragedy in all of this, of course, was Shuggie's schooling, or lack thereof. He was a bright young boy, but no teacher or priest or social service organization either saw what was going on in Shuggie's life or cared enough to do anything about it. When he became an orphan at 16, he was relegated to living in a bedsit in a cheap rooming house. While this is a story of heartbreaking physical, social, emotional, and sexual abuse, it is a love story most of all. Children of alcoholics often are very responsible, driven, and caring people. Many feel responsible for situations they have no control over and often feel that they need to make things right. Leek often told Shuggie to leave Atlas because she was never going to get better. Shuggie always responded with, "But she might." While they are often resilient, children of alcoholics often struggle with their own emotional lives. Like Shuggie, many feel deeply what others feel and have a caring and nurturing side to them. Shuggie eventually finds his way through friendship with the young woman whose own mother is an alcoholic, a homeless alcoholic. Shuggie accompanies Leanne as she wanders the seedy side of Glasgow in search of her mother to give her a change of clothes and some food. Leanne does not need to explain anything to Shuggie. He has been there. When he tells her that just one time he'd like to go dancing, she teases him, quote, "There is no way Shuggie Bain can dance." And Shuggie tutted. He wrenched himself from her side and ran a few paces ahead. He nodded all gallus, which is Glaswegian for proud, and spun just the once on his polished heels. Billy Elliot-like. So now, a little bit about the author. Shuggie Bain is Douglas Stewart's debut novel. It took 10 years to write, received 43 publisher rejections, but as you heard, won the 2020 Booker Prize. Very impressive. Stewart is careful to tell everyone that Shuggie Bain is not autobiographical, not even a memoir. However, he is very upfront about his own upbringing and how his experiences as a wee poof in the working class Glasgow found their way into the novel. He lived in schemes and council housing with his alcoholic single mother. Like Shuggie's mother, Douglas Stewart's mother lost her battle with alcoholism and died when he was 16. While the fictional Shuggie worked full-time at Killfeather's grocery and went to school when he could, Douglas Stewart worked 4 nights a week at Texas home base, kind of like our Home Depot, and all day Saturday and Sunday, just to get through high school. Like Shuggie, he has a brother and a sister. He said that publishers' attribution of working class to his life was a stretch because he never saw his mother working. They lived on the dole. Stewart's life took an upswing at 18 when he left Glasgow to study textiles at the Royal College of Art in London. Following his training in the visual arts, he got his first real job with Calvin Klein. He later moved to New York City and became a leading fashion designer, working around the globe with major brands such as The Gap. Stewart now lives in New York with his husband and is working on his 3rd novel. He has completed his 2nd novel called Loch Awe, also about Scotland. Stewart believes that his work in the visual arts had a great impact on his writing. We have a short interview where he talks about his writing, but I'm not sure if it might work or not.
I'm
Improvising, okay. So while we're working on this, this is it. Oh, you did.
While you're still arriving, a few words on how this meeting is going to work.
Okay.
In a moment, Douglas will speak for us, and even though we won't.
So I'm going to tell you to put your listening ears on again because they are both have a Glasgow accent.
Tonight's book is all about Glasgow, modern Glasgow, our incredible people, our unique charms and particular problems. So we will be offering simultaneous translation for people in Edinburgh.
That's a joke. People in Edinburgh,
That couldn't happen
their
anywhere
accents
else
are very
that
different.
captures the city that I was in love with, but also terrified of when I was growing up, just a few miles down the road at Motherwell. Shuggie Bain is a wee boy growing up in 1980s Glasgow. His world is an Agnes Bain, his glamorous, calamitous mother, who's slowly, ever so slowly, drinking herself to death. Basically, she's Liz Taylor by way of the Barracks. Shuggie tries to save her and finds himself in a city that is both bleak and dazzling. This novel will break your heart, only to make it bigger and stronger and more generous. It's hard to believe that this is Douglas Stewart's first novel. It is nothing short of incredible. The language, the characterization, the world. It is, in a word, gallus, or in 3 words, pure brain. And it deserves all the praise that it's getting, and to be right at the top of that booker list. Douglas was born and brought up in Pollock, but has lived in New York for 20 years, and that's where he joins us from now. Hello, Douglas.
Hello, Damien. It's good to see you again.
And you, how are you?
I'm very well. I've been dreaming about being in Edinburgh ever since I think I put pen to paper. So this is huge for me. Thank you.
But this
Well,
was during
it's an absolute
COVID.
delight to have you here. And this event was booked months and months and months ago, and we thought we would be mincing around Charlotte Square together. We're not. That's the closest we'll get to. There might even have been a digestive at CC Blues. I could have seen that in our future.
Absolutely.
Before we go into your reading, I just want to talk a wee bit about everything that's happened for you recently, because the book is long listed for the Booker Prize.
Which you won.
It's just been getting an incredible amount of praise from some allies, of course, as well. That needs to be said. Some surprising critics. Tell us a bit about that.
Oh, it's been incredible. I mean, I think when you write a book, all you can do as a writer is just write the very best book that you can. And writing the book is a wonderful thing. It's an amazing space to be in. But then when the book is published, it can be quite, it can be really loaded with anxiety. And so none of this I ever foresaw or expected or even dared to hope for, really. And so it's been fantastic to be on the Booker list. But I was telling you earlier, I just received a postcard from Ken Loach, which is my actual. Just casually saying things you say out loud. But that's just a dream for me. You know, it's been such an inspiration. His work has actually 2 young, so it's phenomenal.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense that Ken Loach would absolutely love this, because he's always sort of like a stalker rock. It's amazing. Will you read just a couple of wee bits before you and I have a chat?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what the book looks like, but actually the one I read from looks a wee bit sort of battle-worn. But I wanted just to read 2 short sections for you that focus on Agnes Bain, who, as you said, is the proud, liquid vein mother of the family. And then also, she is married across sectarian lines and married her husband, who is a Protestant, and his name is Shuggie Bain. He's a taxi driver. And he is not a great man. He sort of spends his time philandering across the city. So this is really portraits of both of them where we meet them individually. Chapter 2. Agnes Bain pushed her toes into the carpet and leaned out as far as she could into the night air. The damp wind kissed her flushed neck and pushed down inside her dress. It felt like a stranger's hand, a sign of living, a reminder of life. With a flick, she watched her cigarette down fall, the glowing embers dancing 16 floors down onto the dark forecourt. She wanted to show the city this clad velvet dress. She wanted to feel a little envy from strangers, to dance with men who held her proud and close. Mostly, she wanted to take a good drink, to live a little. With a stretch of her calves, she leaned her hip bone on the window frame and let go of the ballast of her toes. Her body tipped down towards the amber city lights and her cheeks flushed with blood. She reached her arms out to the lights, and for a brief moment she was flying, but no one noticed the flying woman. She thought about tilting further then, dared herself to do it. How easy it would be to kid herself that she was flying until it became only falling, and she broke herself on the concrete below. The high-rise flat she still shared with her mother and father pressed in against her. Everything in the room behind her felt so small, so low-ceilinged and stifling, payday to mass day, a life bought on tick, with nothing that ever felt owned outright. To be 39 and have her husband and her 3 children all crammed together in her mammy's flat gave her a feeling of failure. Him, her man, But when he shared her bed and I seemed to lie on the very edge, made her feel angry with the littered promises of better things. Agnes wanted to put her foot through it all, or to scrape it back like it was spoiled wallpaper, to get her nail under it and rip it all away. And then introduce the Shug.
I think that's enough. Okay. So this is, by the way, a wonderful, wonderful interview with Douglas Stewart. It goes for a whole hour, it's 60 minutes. So what he does in the interview is he reads a portion about Agnes, and the next portion where we stop is really about Big Shug. But later on, he talks about other things in the book as well. So it's a wonderful interview. If you've got the time, it's on YouTube, and you can easily download it and listen to it. So this is a beautifully written book. I hope you read it, if you haven't already. I will say that when I first started reading it, I got to about page 80, and I told Sarah, I can't read this. I can't read this anymore. This is just very grim, and I don't think so. And she said to me, just get beyond page 80. And I did, and then I couldn't, because you get invested in their lives, and and knowing a little bit about the author at the end, and how really, even though he says it's not autobiographical nor a memoir, but knowing a little bit about the author at the end made it all that more important, I think, to read, because I do think in large part this is Douglas Stewart's story. You don't find all of these things about the palette fort and what the schemes looked like and how it felt unless you've lived that life. So it's a very good book. It certainly won. Everybody else thought it was a wonderful book as well, because it did win the 2020 Booker Prize. So thank you. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Yes, Beth.
Well, I don't really have a question, but I do want to say it was a very, very powerful book.
Mhm.
Tough to read, like you said. Devastating situation,
Mhm.
politically, socially, economically. How do people survive that kind of circumstance? And I think it's so interesting. This is his first book, and yet it won the Booker
Yeah.
Award.
Yeah.
That is like the most amazing achievement you could ask. But he told his own story, no matter what he denies. He told his own story so beautifully. Devastating relationship with his mother.
Right.
It's a tender love story of her. And how he survived it is really amazing. And look at him, he's a successful man. Maybe because
he was resilient.
he was resilient and he was able to tell his story.
Right. Right. So that may be part of it.
Anyway, great job on doing it.
Thanks.
Anyone else have a question or comment? Yes, Geri,
No,
go.
I just want something to move about.
I'm sorry?
I just have one, an historical point.
Mhm.
You said something about Margaret Thatcher closing the mines.
Yes.
And what was the reason?
Because of the unions. The unions were very, very powerful at the time. And it was, you have to think of Margaret Thatcher in the same vein as Ronald Reagan. They were birds of a feather in terms, do you remember back in the day when he totally closed all of the air traffic controllers? Do you remember that? The air traffic controllers. Completely said, get out, because it was a strong union. So it really was part of union busting. But again, it was their agenda. It was an agenda that actually both of them, both Reagan and Thatcher shared. But the reason was the unions had been very powerful. And it was one way of getting rid of the unions. Yes.
She closed down the union, the Prussian union.
Oh, I didn't know that. Yeah. Yeah, right. Right. Yeah. Yes,
I would just like to comment that I think Douglas Stewart's denying it's autobiographical.
yes.
Probably the love he has for his mother and to protect her.
Probably. In fact, he didn't want to talk about his mother at all. And then I think I wrote in, I think I put, oh, it's gone. On one of the side, one of the text on the side, I wish I remember, but I think it said that he, or maybe I read that he did not want to talk about his mother. He never wanted to talk about her. And yes, it said, yes, he has been unwilling to reveal the name of his mother in interviews to protect her memory, but just in July 2020, he did. So this is the only picture of her. But she does have black hair. Yeah. So anybody else? No? Okay. All right.
I think it's clear why I was so ardent in my quest to have Geri present to us. Geri, that was so eloquent and so comprehensive. Thank you so much. So that's all the business for today, and we had a wonderful presentation. We hope to see you back here in November to hear Betsy Gallo present Hannah. Thank you for coming today, everyone.